Hello, this is War and Politics channel. My name is Vladislav Novikov. Today we're recording an interview with Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel RashkinReport and local elected official in the state of Wisconsin. Yuri, hello.
Hello, Vladislav, and greetings to all our listeners and viewers. Yes, I'm recording this interview, this conversation from the center of universe, the great state of Wisconsin.
So, Finland's president suggested April 20 as a possible date to stop the war in Ukraine. And there is talk that Trump might visit Saudi Arabia in May, the place where peace talks are happening. That sounds like something big could happen soon. Do you think the war could really end that fast, or is it just talk? Especially since President Stubb said Trump is running out of patience with Russia.
That is an interesting situation that we find ourselves in, because on one hand, it seems like there's a lot of information being thrown at us all the time. Where there's this person said that, and there's this visit to this place, and it may seem confusing at the time, but then at the same time, I think we start to see that a similar pattern emerges every time, where first we'll see Donald Trump say that he will fix the situation in 24 hours and everything is going to be done quickly. And then it turns out he has a plan. And then it turns out that 24 hours was more of a sarcastic statement, like a figure of speech, like a slam dunk. Not 24 hours early, although Russian speakers joke about just tell us when the 24 hours starts so that we would know. But we are in a situation where there is no really end in sight if we are being open-minded and if we open our eyes. Because yes, we have politicians now speaking about peace, about ceasefires, about all those things that are so wonderful to hear. But reality is that Putin continues the war. Putin continues to attack Ukrainian cities and Ukrainian civilians and on and on. And yes, it makes President of the United States look kind of weak in this situation, because it seems like he's covering up for somebody who is not doing their part. And it may seem reasonable that under such circumstances, President of the United States would grow tired of this kind of behavior from this very recently our great adversary, Russia and Putin, but now potentially our best friend in the world. And so we see Trump criticize Putin. We all write about it. We talk about it. It seems like, oh my gosh, finally something. This is now Trump is really going to show Putin all of that stuff. And then a few hours later, we see how Trump walks back those statements every time. I don't know how many times the cycle has to repeat so that people go, let's see, how long is it going to take before, I don't know, he gets a call from Peskov and says, Donald, you can't do that. Come on, you're talking about Putin here. So I don't know what happened if he just kind of, if this is a negotiation tactic. But it's important to acknowledge that even those strong worded statements about Putin, Trump is still trying to sit on the fence about how he feels. Like, if I will decide that this is Russia's fault, then there will be consequences. So Trump leaves his judgment as a prize. Do you want me to make my judgment this way or this way? Fight for my judgment. Fight for my support. Otherwise, he has no, apparently, morals that can direct him in any particular direction. Money, possibly, benefits. We see this with people all the time. But just a few make it so clear. And in this situation, we can hope for a quick end to war. We need to hope for an end to war. We can't be hopeful for an endless. Who is hopeful for an endless war? Maybe China, for an endless war between Russia and Ukraine and the West and everybody, while China can sit back and enjoy all of this. right now we see, of course, that Baltic countries are actually nervous about peace because they're concerned that as soon as Russia stops losing people, what is it, 1,000 a day, a week, whatever, at a huge pace in Ukraine, then they will just redirect those troops to Baltic state borders. And that makes Baltic states very, very uncomfortable, uneasy. And it's an interesting realization that there are consequences to ceasefires as well. But the circumstances under which this is being done, we have to acknowledge Putin is still the same Putin he's been all his life. He is not following directions. He is not following agreements, follow-through on agreements. He is недоговороспособный. You can't make agreements with him. Mm-hmm. He is unagreeable with. The Russians have a great, like very long word for this. And it's important that different leaders continue to speak to Trump and continue to remind him and show him the consequences of his actions and show him that, Ukraine is more willing to work with him than Russia, although it seems that Ukraine now is potentially, in Trump's opinion, walking away from the minerals deal. And if that is going to be the scenario, so I think there's some room for Ukrainian diplomacy to do some work. But in the end, it is Putin that breaks every agreement he has made. And he's counting on Trump to kind of swallow it. And whether President of the United States is willing to swallow insults from a Russian leader, well, I mean, it's, for me as an American, I find this whole thing is very insulting. Because we're Americans, we are looking, we know we're not Russia. We know that Russia is a weak country that wants to, just expand its territory and make life of everybody miserable. That's great. I mean, that's pretty blatant and clear for hundreds of years how they've been operating. But now, of course, we have a president who thinks that that is the right approach. And that means that Greenland, Canada is now could be, United States, and Ukraine could be part of Russia. And, I just came back from visiting Israel for the first time. And I think that Donald Trump looks at Gaza and Israel like Ukraine and Russia, and he thinks that Gaza belongs to Israel, and he, kind of the same way that Ukraine belongs to Russia. There's a very consistent worldview, so it doesn't make sense to call people crazy. They have an agenda that they're following through. It's just that we don't think it's a reasonable agenda, but calling it madness doesn't really help us. Trump doesn't have a plan. He has a direction. He has preferences. He has, things he'd like to see happen. And he would like to see the war in Ukraine, and so that Trump could have good relationship with Putin, and America could have even a better relationship with Russia. It is a plan that they're trying to make real, in part because I think Trump wants to be with Putin on Red Square on May 9th. And if Ukraine does not agree, or there is no ceasefire by then it seems like perception in the White House at the moment is that it would make a little more difficult going to Red Square on May 9th to celebrate the 80th anniversary of specifically the day that Russia, Soviet Union, pardon my French, Soviet Union signed a capitulation with Germany or vice versa, because the rest of the world knows World War II continued until Japan surrendered. But of course, this is a Russian-Soviet universe, and Donald Trump is willing to be a part of it, which is, again, so just embarrassingly just shameful. So with that in mind, there will be a date, but it's not going to be quick, and it's not going to be lasting because Putin is still there. And as long as Putin is going to be there, he will want to expand Russian territory. And unfortunately, there's a kind of opinion forming that even if Putin isn't there, Russia will continue to go in the same direction because it's kind of working. The country has been changed into a military structure. And now, well, let's just continue in that vein. It seems to be working okay from Russian point of view. I'm not going to say it's crazy because it's their logic. Just because I don't like it, I don't accept it, I reject it, it doesn't mean that I shouldn't look at it as somebody has a plan and they're executing this plan. And talks about soon war ending, all of this kind of stuff is a lot of fuzzy air and delusions and disinformation and wishful thinking. But reality is that Ukraine is not going to surrender to Russia. It just doesn't make sense for Ukrainians to do so. And it doesn't make sense for Europe to do so. So it's hard to imagine Ukraine capitulating to Russia like Donald Trump wishes it would. I think really coming back to the first 24 hours, Donald Trump thinks that if he was president of Ukraine, he'd make deal with Putin. Of course, he's so much smarter than Zelensky. And reasonable people in the mind of Donald Trump will make the deal that he wants to be made between Russia, Ukraine, because in Donald Trump's mind, this is reasonable. The fact is that there's reasonableness and the realism of the Trump administration, and there's also reality. And then reality is such that Ukraine can't surrender, and Ukraine can't accept capitulation on Trump, Putin, Musk's terms. And the conversations about minerals can be right now just a ploy for time, waiting for those agreements on weapons that Biden has signed and Biden approved. Oh, evil Biden. As long as those continue, then this makes sense for Ukraine to maintain some kind of a conversation with the United States about some kind of an agreement because, well, maybe Ukraine is stalling for time. I don't know that... I think Trump is catching on to that because this is his style. You know, you delay, and now he sees that Ukraine is delaying, and he knows that, so he's not happy. But those are the facts.
Mm-hmm. So, Yuri, do you think a ceasefire is even possible that soon, or we talk about years? I mean, Putin keeps pushing the war forward, but that doesn't really line up with Trump's plan to stop it.
It's true. I think Putin continues with his plans, and the fact that Trump would like them to change his plans means I think it appears very little to Vladimir Putin. The fact that, just wishes of anybody don't seem to matter to Vladimir Putin. Will Donald Trump get fed up? Will he get really upset to the point that he will not walk those comments back 2 hours later? We are yet to see. So far, well, yes, it is clear. He thinks, he has a vision that things should have been worked out by now. But reality is such that Putin doesn't follow through on agreements. So whether Donald Trump will at some point come to this realization or not, there are some arguments to be made that there's a path through which Donald Trump has let people go, in a sense that he feels that people eventually all betray him, eventually everybody turns on him, and so I guess why not Vladimir Putin? But it's a little hard to imagine considering the multi-decade relationship that Trump speaks of openly every day about Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump and that close relationship. I think you, Vladislav, have, I'm sure, friends that you've been friends with for a long, long time. And sometimes people say things, that are angry, that are frustrated. But, between friends, you can work it out, and then you have that multi-year relationship to have that bank account you've invested the feelings and emotions to rely on. Those guys will be fine. I think Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin will be friends. But I think that the problem is that Trump would like to be friends with Putin. But Putin doesn't really view Trump as equal. He looks down on Trump, and Trump looks up at Putin. It is so obvious. It is so clear. We observe it every time there's these interactions. And yet it is so horrendously horrific to imagine this scenario that we keep coming up with all sorts of explanations to explain why this is just bad, presidenting. Mm-hmm. Like if Donald Trump just doesn't know what he is doing, and that's why. I think he knows what he is doing too well, and he's basically destroying the American economy. This is where ceasefire and those kinds of conversations, I think that Ukraine has to decide for itself, and Ukraine no longer has the support of United States, but it has support of Americans who are, as we are dealing with our crisis over here, continue to support Ukraine, and Ukraine has support of people all over the world, from Canada to Europe to Australia to Japan, and we see that the result of all of these seemingly erratic actions by President of the United States are making Europe great again. This mega, which actually makes sense, it's actually a word. Is happening because people are seeing that dealing with the United States is difficult. And if the United States is going to go the path of Hungary, we need to acknowledge that Hungary is now Hungary. I'm sorry. They are first or second, the poorest country in the European Union. I mean, this is really just demonstration that these things don't work. what Orban, what Trump they're offering is bad idea for an average person in the nation that they supposedly serve. And as people come to this realization, of course, some get mad, some get, reaffirmed. Talking about ceasefires with how can be a ceasefire maintained with somebody that breaks. I feel like I have to answer you back with Zelensky's question from February 28th to J.D. Vance. But like, what kind of diplomacy are you talking about when Putin breaks every deal he's ever made? I think Ukrainians understand this perhaps even better than Americans. Mm-hmm. And therefore, Trump will continue to push Ukraine to peace on his terms, which is essentially capitulation or surrender. He will continue to look for ways to plunder Ukraine's natural resources. And he will continue to do what he has been doing. And Ukraine will continue to fight like it's been doing. And Europe is actually going to be helping more and more every day, as it has been doing as well.
But I have one important question about emotions. Trump said he was really angry after Putin questioned Zelensky's legitimacy. That's a big shift. Looks like something went wrong between them. Do you think they had some kind of deal that's now falling apart? How long can Putin keep testing Trump's patience? And will Trump finally get tough on Putin like he's being tough on Ukraine this whole time?
I think we should keep watching the actions instead of paying attention overwhelmingly to words. Because when we are seeing actions and there's been no new aid, no new help to Ukraine, the only thing we're negotiating right now, as I'm watching these negotiations, is about the existing help, existing aid that was already signed given under President Biden. So we're not really seeing any actions from Donald Trump that would lead us to believe that he has anything but positive feelings towards Russia and negative feelings towards Ukraine. I know it's hard for Ukrainians to believe this, but Donald Trump doesn't really care for them very much. And he doesn't really care for things that matter in a democracy very much. He has a different worldview. And Vladimir Putin much better fits into this worldview, which actually is very familiar to Ukrainian listeners and viewers because it's the so-called Russian world, which they know, they understand, but they can't fathom that President of the United States can have the same amoral code that allows them to ignore all sorts of standards and all sorts of rules because he believes in personal relations and then that kind of a personal, I can't call it personal ethic because there's some actual standards there. But this is we see this for decades. So to expect a man of his age to start acting differently, that would be madness. I think if we expected Donald Trump to act differently from how he's been acting for almost 80 years, that we would be the ones who would be crazy because every time Donald Trump gets upset and frustrated and he so ever carefully jabs Vladimir Putin and says, "Oh, Vladimir, doesn't he understand what a difficult situation he is in? This makes me so mad." No, he doesn't understand. He feels like he's fine. Mm-hmm. And he feels like you're going to swallow it, Donald Trump. And if you're going to swallow it, then he's right. And if you're not going to swallow it, then you're going to give more military aid to Ukraine. It's so simple. And until Donald Trump decides that it makes more sense to give military aid to Ukraine, he's going to be seen as weak. And it's not about blackmail. It's not about, it's as far as like, I'm sorry, I'm going to take that back. There is blackmail, of course. I mean, look at the people we're dealing with. But it's not about the any certain videotape or anything. Really, what makes the most sense is that Vladimir Putin is the only one who clearly knows how he influenced Trump's victory. Because, when I buy ads on Facebook, it gives me a very precise breakdown of what happened and what I did. That's what they do. So Donald Trump can receive from Vladimir Putin a full list of things that would explain how and what Vladimir Putin has done to influence the election in Donald Trump's favor and to show how dependent and really illegitimate, perhaps, who knows what fears may live inside a troubled person's mind what's going to happen next. So I think there is some blackmail. But people, I think, usually try to not think of the fears but they want to think of the positives of the relationship. And of course, there are positives to a relationship between a leader of FSB and a United States president. They may not be the benefits that we may have thought before, but there are advantages. I mean, he can probably get now Trump Tower in every city. Whatever, I think that I'm sure he's been promised lots of things that are exactly what he was hoping to hear, because words are so easy to say. So Putin has a relationship with Trump that is clear, that is long-standing, that requires a certain amount of manipulation and control from Putin to kind of guide Trump in the direction that he wants him to go. But at the same time, with understanding that Donald Trump is somewhat, how do I say, hard to manage. And so I think people that think that he is that Putin is happy that Putin is happy with the performance, I think are underestimating the volatility of Donald Trump. But then end result seems to be the at least economic and military and foreign reputation destruction of America. That's got to make Vladimir Putin happy.
Mm-hmm. And I can't ignore this next topic. Trump says he is not joking about running for third terms. And some say he could stay in power until 2037. Doesn't that remind you of someone? I mean, maybe Putin? Just saying. We will talk about this before, but I have to ask again. Is this what democracy looks like now? Does America need a version of democracy that looks more like Putin, Lukashenko, or even Kim Jong-un?
I think that this is what democracy looks like. This is what we see when it's actually a slogan from Wisconsin protests, because when we occupied the Capitol in 2011, and there were crowds marching around the Capitol in Madison, and people were chanting, "This is what democracy looks like." It's a great ta 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 ta. Works very well as a chant. I think that Americans are paying attention. Polls are showing that 70% of people are paying close attention or somewhat close attention to the news because they feel that it affects them, it affects their lives, it's interesting. And at least 25% of people apparently think that this is just entertaining, which I understand were logic some of the people that voted for Vladimir Zelensky, thinking that at least this will be entertaining. And similarly for Donald Trump in 2016 and now. So, I mean, there's entertainment factor seems to be interesting to a certain part of the voting public. And in the United States, that's right now seems to be about 25%. I go back to what Stephen Bannon said not that long ago, and that is that Donald Trump has to go for a third term, because otherwise, as soon as he leaves the White House, he's going to go to jail. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, he almost did. The only thing that stopped him from going to jail, really, was getting elected president. So it makes sense. It really makes sense why he would want to go for third term. Because if we go back to Russian example, which is relevant on some levels, although not too closely, but still, Putin gave power over to Medvedev, we may recall. Those that pay attention remember that Putin was term limited, so he gave power to Medvedev, and then Medvedev carefully handed the power back to Putin in 2012. And if this is, this is not necessarily a situation that Donald Trump has currently set up, but I think the only way for him to feel like he can walk away from being a three-term president is to be absolutely certain, either for the fact that he controls the elections either on some kind of a technical level or because he's so overwhelmingly popular that people will vote for whoever he appoints to be his replacement. And then and that will ensure his safety and stability, almost like a Boris Yeltsin style, I guess. So maybe in that sense. But even looking at what happened to Boris Yeltsin and his people over time, and I think even though Putin followed the agreement supposedly made with Yeltsin family when power was handed over to Putin, In the end, Russia still became a worse country, a more despotic, more authoritarian, country that's on the outskirts of democratic society. That it's going to be a situation where people will have to decide that they like what Donald Trump is doing, and therefore they will reelect him or whoever he decides. Or people are thinking that they're not happy with what he is doing, and then he will either lose on election, or we saw those that saw movie Civil War, whereas I understand specifically president's desire to continue and violate the law. This way is what launched that Civil War in the movie. So who knows what's going to happen, but those are, I think, some of our most likely possibilities.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you about Trump's trade war. He says he's ready to slap tariffs on the whole world, not just 10 or 15 countries. He called it a way to bring back fairness. But the markets aren't exactly thanking him for it. Big money wants stability, and right now it's looking for that in Europe. So does Trump actually have plan about trade war? Trade wars are expensive, and so far it's Americans who are footing the bill. Do people feel that?
Yes, we do. I think that people are feeling this, and it comes back to the fact that either you trust in Trump and you believe that this is all going to work out great, or you are very concerned and you're making all sorts of alternate plans, part of what's making Europe great again. People want stability. Markets want predictability. Donald Trump is neither. Donald Trump has 6 bankruptcies, which means that you write off all your debts and you walk away. So is he looking at a bankruptcy of the United States and he's going to walk away and say, well, I got out of the market at the right time? Who knows? But I think that everybody is very concerned. Markets are falling all over the world, and this is how to destroy American economy 101. It's very simple, because you just announced tariffs, and yes, you do not need tariffs you don't need Congress to vote in your support on this. You can, as a president, just announce tariffs. But because Donald Trump's specialty is bad ideas, and that's really all that's really key to know here. When we look at tariffs, we can presume that it's a bad idea, and then after looking at it for 5-10 seconds or less, we can figure out a number of ways in which it is a bad idea. Right now, it is destroying our economy, to summarize everything, because unfortunately, I have to leave you and our dear listeners until next time. And the chances that Donald Trump will come to a realization before our next conversation and realize that tariffs are a terrible idea and he is destroying American economy while making all of our enemies richer, more prosperous, and our competitors richer and more prosperous. We shall see if this will happen before our next conversation. I doubt it, but we shall discuss it next time.
Yuri, thank you for this conversation, and thanks you, viewers. Our guest was Yuri Rashkin, host of RashkinReport and local official from Wisconsin. Thank you for being with us. Yuri, thank you.
Absolutely, and I will just say, I started with this, I should end with this, even though we're out of time. But Wisconsin, April 1st is going to be elections. If you live like me in Wisconsin and you haven't voted like me yet in Wisconsin, we need to vote, and of course we will vote in the election, and we will send a message to who? Elon Musk, that he doesn't own Wisconsin, that we, the voters, own our own state. See how that works? Thank you so much. Slava Ukraini.